Hello fam, this is a video showing you how to use your calculator to make a scatter plot. Before we do that, let's check back in on the last problem that we did. The last problem that we talked about was the random sample of 11 students. Their attendance and their number of questions correct on an assessment were recorded, and we were supposed to make the scatter plot by hand. So your scatter plot should look similar to mine. It definitely does not need to be exactly like mine. Oftentimes in scatter plots you are estimating. So he's gone. You're estimating your points, and so our graphs might look slightly different, but overall they should look the same. Or look similar, I should say. So we did not get the chance to describe this scatter plot. I would like for you to pause the video and describe this scatter plot with this instruction. So you have your phrases to memorize in our notes that is giving you the absolute essential things that you must say. This phrasing you have to include in your description or description of a scatter plot or description of association. Now you can add things on, just like in this problem down here. If I would have left myself more room where you're seeing these asterisks, if I would have left myself more room, I would have added that on. So what you see in the first part is the phrases to memorize, and then what you see at the very end are the things that I would add in that give more information about this graph that might be different than what we're seeing. So loud. So this is a negative association. It's also curved. But what we don't mention in this top part is that there does look to be two different groups, and there does appear to be an outlier in each group. So what we have in the sentence frame is correct and accurate, and we absolutely have to say everything that's in the sentence frame. But what I have added on is also important information that is unique to this scatter plot. So this you will be able to say about every scatter plot, but then the things that you add on at the end are probably only going to be specific to the scatter plot that you're looking at. So let's go back to the last scatter plot that I left you with. And I want you to describe this scatter plot using those sentence frames, and then at the very end add in anything that you might think is worth mentioning. So clusters would be worth mentioning, groups would be worth mentioning, unusual points would be worth mentioning. So unusual points are points that you think might be an outlier. So pause. Okay, hopefully y'all really paused. Now when I show you mine, if you pause and you match it up to this phrases to memorize, you will see that I am following the phrases to memorize like all the way through up until the very end. So my response and yours, so I gotta make my face big for this, because this was an issue with your Unit 3, you're working with standard normal curves. In that unit, when we did free response problems, you had to include every single thing that I included in our notes and in our quiz solutions and our can you do solutions. And I don't know where the miscommunication came from, but you guys did not think that you needed to write in all of the stuff that I wrote in. So on this, when we go through what I am writing here, you basically have to have what I have written, like exactly as I have it written. So what I have is, there is a strong positive linear relationship between % of school days attended and questions correct on the EOY Algebra 1 assessment. So EOY is end of year Algebra 1 assessment. In general, as attendance increases, questions answered correctly increases. So let's pause there for a second. On this, in my first sentence, I was as specific as possible with my response and explanatory variables. So I said percent of school days attended, not just attendance. I said percent of school days attended. I was very specific. And end of year Algebra 1 assessment. Then when I go into my next sentence, I can be more brief because I've already been explicit with my context. So now when I say in general, as attendance increases, well, I don't need to say school days attended because I was already specific and said that. So I can just say attendance here and questions answered correctly here. So you have to take the long way in the first sentence, and then you can take the short way in the second sentence. Then I needed to add on one thing, but I ran out of room. So I wrote an asterisk here, and this is what I would have included afterward. There is an unusual point at 67,31. The student might be an outlier. So he does follow the form. He is in line in the pattern of this scatter plot, but he is farther away from these points. Like, he's farther away from this point than any other point is from each other, so he could potentially be an outlier. Notice the phrasing that I used unusual point. So this is our phrasing for our percent attendance and our questions correct. So now what we need to just finish up is our making a scatter plot using our calculator. So in this particular question, what we're doing is we're going to use our calculator to graph this information, but what we're going to write down here is our description of the scatter plot. So we're going to use calculator to make scatter plot and then describe scatter plot, but not draw it. So to begin, you need to enter in both of your variables. So let's read the prompt. 9th grade students at the Webb schools go on a backpacking trip each fall. Students are divided into hiking groups of size 8 by selecting names from a hat, so they're randomly selected. Before leaving, students and their backpacks are weighed. The data here are from one hiking group in a recent year. Use your calculator to create a scatter plot, then describe the association. So notice, describe the association and describe the scatter plot mean the same thing. Those are interchangeable. So they don't tell me specifically which variable is the response and which is the explanatory. So I'm going to rely on my knowledge of most mathematical tables and assume body weight is X and backpack is Y. And then I'm going to think about it and make sure that that makes sense. So would it make sense to me that your body weight would influence how much you can carry in your backpack? Yeah. If you are a larger person, you can probably carry more, and if you are a very small person, you're probably not carrying as much as other people. So it does make sense to me that the heavier you are, that influences how much weight you can carry. So these need to go into separate lists. Just to make my life easy, I'm going to make X list 1, and I'm going to make Y list 2. So I will go into my calculator, and we hit Stat button, 1 button, and then you edit. So Stat 1, then I have my backpack weights entered in list 1 and my my body weights in list 1 and my backpack weights in list 2. One important thing to verify when you get to the end of your lists, when you are making scatter plots, this is really important. Check that you have the same number of observations. So check that your lists end at the same spot, or else your scatter plot won't be able to be made. So pause if you need to, enter into one list. It doesn't matter which ones you choose. You might want to write them down on your paper though, like I did. The backpack weight and the body weight. Verify that they're at the same, they end at the same spot. Then you're going to go into your blue button. So second button, y equals. So I'm just going to keep a list of steps over here to the side. And I always just have one plot on, so I'm just going to always choose the one that is on. So I am going to go to number 1. Your scatter plot is the very first graph in the plot option. It's the very first one. This guy is a normal probability plot. This guy, scatter plot. Now they're saying, what's your X variable? Well, mine was in list 1. If yours is in list 5, you hit blue button 5. You cannot just type in L5. You have to use blue button and the number that your list is in. So my X is in list 1 because that's what I wrote down here. And my Y is in list 2. I like my points to be like these open dot guys, but you can change it to any of these. And then from here, flashing on that list 2, I'm going to hit graph. If your scatter plot does not look like mine, then you're going to hit zoom stat. So zoom 9. And now we are supposed to describe this scatter plot. It's not a lot of points. More points would be helpful, but given the points that we have, we need to use our phrases to memorize from this page, and we need to describe the scatter plot. Or you can use this up here that we wrote down as your guide to describe. Actually, it says describe the association. Which reminds me, up here, I wrote relationship. Your sentence frame says association. Either one is okay. You can write relationship or association. Association is probably better, though. But this I wouldn't have missed points on. So let's both pause. I will leave my phrases to memorize up, just in case that's helpful to you. We'll both pause. And we will describe, I'll describe the scatter plot, you describe the scatter plot, and we will unpause and compare our answers. Okay, I have mine ready to go. Remember, as we read through this, yours basically has to be exactly the same as mine. If you leave anything out, then you will miss points on this for your AP exam. So what I have is, there is a moderately strong, positive, linear association between body weight and backpack weight. Now, in deciding whether or not it is, sorry, let me get that off. In deciding whether or not your relationship is strong or moderately strong or weak, you will get more guidance on that in our next lesson, because right now all we talked about was perfect, strong, weak. But there are other categories like moderately strong, moderately weak. So if you're uncomfortable with that for now, you're okay. That will be easier for you to determine as we move through our lessons. So on this one assignment, as long as you're in the right direction, so you think it's strong, but you didn't put moderately strong, you're okay. I would write it in, but I wouldn't be worried. So I would categorize this as moderately strong. Part of the reason that it's moderately strong is because of this kid right here. This student is making it so that this straight line that could be there is not as straight as with this point right here. So that's how I determine moderately strong. In general, as body weight increases, backpack weight also increases. Then I finished with the student or point, you could use either one, at 187,30 is unusual and may be an outlier. You want to use the word unusual. So I would, if you said the student at 187,30 may be an outlier, that's great, but you want to try to remember to add in that he's unusual, and that's why he might be an outlier. Before I finish up this video, I just want to mention I wasn't very descriptive with my X and Y because the table is not very descriptive and neither is the prompt. So if it is very descriptive like this problem, then you want to give as much information as possible. But down here, if they are not being very descriptive, you also do not have to be very descriptive. So that is it for our basics on scatter plots. The biggest takeaways from this lesson are the phrases to memorize, being able to identify which variable is explanatory and which one is response, knowing the descriptions for a scatter plot, so the form, strength, and direction. And then lastly, but probably most importantly, being able to describe a scatter plot or describe an association. Remember, those two things are interchangeable. That should be enough to get you through your can you do. Your can you do is basically giving you opportunities to practice describing scatter plots. As usual, if you guys have any questions, let me know. And if you have any trouble getting the scatter plot into your calculator, email me or talk to me in class and we'll get it figured out together. Okay, that's it. Love y'all.